The home that Wayne lived in and the Hollywood pedigree may be long gone, but this impressive property still remains, and a lot of stories here on Luis Avenue, that's for sure.
For decades, John Wayne symbolized the rugged American spirit, a man larger than life, whose name became synonymous with strength and independence. But behind the image of the Duke lies a mystery that even the boldest real estate moguls refuse to touch. His once grand estate, filled with priceless memorabilia and echoes of old Hollywood, now sits eerily silent, unwanted, untouched, and almost forgotten. Why would no one want to own a piece of cinematic history? The answer isn't simple. From bitter family battles to legal traps and whispered secrets sealed within its walls, this is not just an abandoned mansion. It is a time capsule of power, greed, and legacy, one that even money cannot tame. When John Wayne passed away in June of 1979, America did not just lose a movie star, it lost a symbol. The man who defined the Western genre left behind more than 170 films, a Hollywood legacy worth millions, and an image that became part of the national identity. But beyond the fame, Wayne also left behind an empire of land, collectibles, and real estate that spoke volumes about who he was off-screen. Among his holdings, one estate stood out, a sprawling property in Newport Beach, California, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was everything you would imagine the Duke owning: grand, private, and drenched in golden California light. Inside were personal treasures, rare scripts, handwritten letters, photographs with old Hollywood legends, and mementos from his films. Each room seemed to breathe with his presence. After his passing, the house became more than just a residence. It turned into a shrine, a silent tribute to the man who once ruled the silver screen with a stare as sharp as a bullet. But what started as a family monument soon became a mystery. Over the years, stories began to circulate that parts of Wayne's estate were quietly sealed off. Some said it was to preserve his legacy. Others believed it was to hide personal matters that the family did not want public. Either way, the home that once symbolized success slowly transformed into a relic of isolation. And that was just the beginning. The estate became the centerpiece of larger questions about who truly controlled John Wayne's image, his fortune, and the use of his name. With multiple heirs, business partners, and brand managers all claiming a piece of the Duke's empire, the estate fell into a strange kind of limbo. Valuable, historic, but untouchable. It was no longer just a house. It had become a battleground between memory and ownership. To the outside world, John Wayne's estate should have been one of the most sought-after properties in California. Instead, it turned into a ghost of its former self, guarded by legal complexities and family tension. But that was only the surface. The real reasons for its abandonment run deeper into what happened immediately after Wayne's death, when the gates of his property closed for the first time and secrets began to settle in the dust. When John Wayne's funeral ended, his family and close associates gathered at the Newport Beach estate to begin sorting through his belongings. What they found inside was overwhelming. Thousands of personal effects, from worn cowboy boots and dusty film props to letters from U.S. presidents and handwritten notes from studio heads. Every drawer, every trunk seemed to hold another piece of history. For a while, it was like walking through a museum curated by the Duke himself. But soon, that museum turned into a locked vault. In the months following his death, sections of the property were quietly sealed off. Officially, the explanation was simple: to preserve the integrity of Wayne's possessions until the estate could be properly appraised. Unofficially, there were rumors of something more complicated. Some insiders whispered that there were private documents, letters, and contracts that the family did not want in public view. Others hinted at personal recordings and journals that could reveal sides of Wayne the world had never seen. The estate, once a symbol of openness and grandeur, suddenly became a fortress of silence. Access was restricted to a select few, and even they were not allowed to enter certain rooms. Over time, stories began to spread. Tales of safes hidden behind paintings, storage spaces filled with memorabilia that had never been cataloged, and entire rooms left exactly as Wayne had last used them. Meanwhile, the legal team handling his affairs struggled to bring order to the chaos. Wayne's wealth was spread across multiple properties, business ventures, and brand rights. Sorting through it all required years of litigation and paperwork. The house remained untouched, frozen in time, as lawyers and accountants debated who truly had the authority to handle what was inside. As the years passed, the once lively home began to decay. Salt air from the Pacific corroded the windows and metal fixtures. Paint began to peel. The once manicured lawns grew wild. To fans, the idea that John Wayne's home was deteriorating felt almost unthinkable. But to those familiar with Hollywood estates, it was an all-too-common story, a legacy trapped in legal limbo. Still, the locked doors stirred curiosity. What was so important, or perhaps so dangerous, that it needed to remain hidden? Some said it was family protection. Others believed it was image control. Whatever the reason, the lockdown created an aura of mystery that never quite faded. And yet, the legal complications were only one layer. The real turning point came when the family itself, once united in honoring the Duke's legacy, began to fracture over how to manage his name, his image, and his wealth. What started as preservation soon spiraled into division, setting the stage for one of the most complicated family rifts in Hollywood history. The Wayne family had always projected an image of unity, built on the rugged honor their father embodied on screen. But behind the closed doors of that California estate, tensions began to simmer. John Wayne had 7 children from 3 marriages, and each carried a different piece of his legacy, emotionally and financially. When the time came to decide what to do with his estate, opinions split like cracks in old desert rock. At the center of the conflict was the question of control. Who owned John Wayne's name, image, and the valuable brand he had built over a lifetime? To fans, he was the Duke, a larger-than-life figure who represented American grit. But to his heirs, that name was a multi-million-dollar business opportunity, and not everyone agreed on how it should be managed. Disagreements quickly escalated. Some of Wayne's children wanted to turn the estate into a museum or foundation, preserving his legacy for fans and historians. Others preferred to focus on John Wayne Enterprises, the company managing his likeness, licensing deals, and trademarks. With so many interests colliding, even small decisions turned into battles. The Newport Beach property, once a symbol of their father's triumph, became a casualty of indecision. The tensions only grew when external legal fights began. One of the most publicized conflicts came years later, when the estate clashed with Duke University over the use of the word Duke. The university, famous for its athletic teams, claimed ownership of the name in certain markets, while the Wayne family argued that Duke had always belonged to John Wayne. What began as a branding dispute turned into a symbolic tug-of-war over identity itself, a university defending its image against the heirs of an American legend. The legal entanglements piled up. Trademarks, merchandising rights, and tax disputes kept the estate tied up in paperwork for decades. Every unresolved issue made it harder to sell or even maintain parts of the property. As attorneys argued in courtrooms, the mansion itself gathered dust. And underneath it all were the personal wounds. Some family members felt others were exploiting their father's memory for profit. Others believed that without aggressive management, John Wayne's image would fade into nostalgia. The infighting reached a point where joint decisions became almost impossible. To outsiders, it might have seemed like simple bureaucracy, but to those close to the estate, it was emotional warfare disguised as business. The fights drained time, money, and trust. And the longer they lasted, the more the estate deteriorated. By the early 2000s, John Wayne's house was no longer a cherished home. It was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong, a relic of a family's struggle to balance love, pride, and power. And while the legal chaos raged on, something unexpected began happening inside the estate itself. People who were granted access started discovering strange and fascinating remnants of the Duke's life, untouched for decades, hidden in plain sight. When parts of John Wayne's Newport Beach estate were finally opened years later, those who stepped inside described it as stepping into another era, a moment in time that had never moved forward. Dust clung to the curtains, sunlight filtered through half-closed blinds, and the faint scent of old leather and cigars hung in the air. The Duke's presence lingered everywhere, as though he had simply walked out of the room and never returned. Inside, archivists and family members found rooms filled with history, thousands of personal artifacts spanning decades of Hollywood and American culture. There were film scripts with handwritten notes in Wayne's unmistakable scrawl, early drafts from movies like True Grit and The Searchers, and letters exchanged with politicians, including Presidents Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. His gun collection, meticulously maintained, remained locked in custom cases. Dozens of unopened liquor bottles lined the shelves, left untouched since the 70s, each with a label faded by time. But among the more fascinating discoveries were boxes of personal correspondence, letters between Wayne and close friends, business associates, and family members. Some revealed a softer, more reflective side of the man rarely seen by the public. Others hinted at his frustrations with the changing film industry, his health struggles, and his complicated relationships. Many of these documents were never released to the public, fueling speculation about what else the family might still be keeping sealed. The estate also contained curious items that blurred the line between legend and mystery. Some claimed there were reels of unseen home footage, candid moments with his children, behind-the-scenes glimpses from film sets, and private recordings that offered rare insight into his personality. Others spoke of unsent letters and projects Wayne had begun near the end of his life, perhaps intending to leave behind a message that was never completed. For those who were allowed inside, it was both awe-inspiring and eerie. The house was a museum without visitors, a legacy preserved in silence. Everything was valuable, not just financially, but historically. Yet, that value made the property nearly impossible to manage. Every item had to be cataloged, authenticated, and protected from damage. Moving or selling anything risked stirring new family disagreements or legal challenges. The estate became what collectors called frozen value, an asset too significant to sell, but too complex to maintain. Potential buyers were warned that purchasing the property could mean inheriting decades of preservation responsibilities, insurance liabilities, and unresolved ownership questions. The house was beautiful, yes, but it came with a mountain of complications. And that was before the rumors began spreading. Whispers of missing artifacts, misplaced items, and unrecorded treasures created an air of mystique, the sense that the house was hiding something even deeper. To some, it was a priceless archive. To others, it was a vault of unfinished business. Still, one truth was becoming clearer with time. Even if the estate were restored to perfection, few would dare to own it. The property's worth was tangled in sentiment, secrecy, and memory, things no amount of money could easily untangle. But the problems extended beyond the artifacts. The very land beneath the house carried its own set of burdens, legal, financial, and environmental. And those practical challenges would soon become the biggest reason no one wanted to buy John Wayne's abandoned estate. At first glance, John Wayne's Newport Beach estate should have been one of the most desirable pieces of property on the California coast. A prime location overlooking the harbor, just minutes from the ocean, and with deep Hollywood history embedded in its walls. For any other celebrity home, this would have been a dream listing. Yet, for decades, no one seriously pursued it. Even wealthy collectors, nostalgic fans, and real estate developers kept their distance. The question was no longer who could afford it, but who would dare take it on. The estate had become what brokers call a beautiful burden. Its size, history, and location were assets, but each one came with hidden costs. Maintaining the sprawling property required immense funds, from constant repairs to coastal preservation requirements. The home had weathered decades of salty ocean air, corrosion, and water damage, leaving structural concerns that would cost millions to restore. And because of its age and heritage, it could not be easily remodeled without violating preservation guidelines or upsetting fans who viewed it as a cultural monument. Then there were the legal knots. The property was still tied to John Wayne Enterprises, which owned trademarks and memorabilia associated with his name. Any sale or transfer risked entangling the buyer in licensing issues. Potential investors feared that purchasing the estate meant stepping into decades of legal baggage, lawsuits, brand restrictions, and potential disputes over what could or could not be displayed or altered. Financially, it was also a paradox. Appraisers could never agree on its true value. Some saw it as a priceless artifact, while others argued that its age and maintenance costs made it nearly unsellable. Local zoning rules further complicated matters, restricting development or commercial use. Turning it into a museum, event space, or boutique hotel, as many had suggested, would require permits and community approval that few were willing to fight for. Adding to the challenge was the estate's haunting symbolism. For many, it was not just a property, it was the last trace of a bygone Hollywood era. Buying it felt almost sacrilegious, like trying to own a piece of history that should remain untouched. Even those who admired Wayne deeply hesitated, afraid that any modern use might tarnish the Duke's image. The estate became a paradoxical space, too valuable to destroy, yet too complicated to preserve. And as the years passed, the market only grew colder. Luxury homes in Newport Beach continued to sell for record prices, but Wayne's property remained frozen in time, a quiet outlier surrounded by the growing hum of modern wealth. Realtors admitted privately that they could not find a buyer who wanted both the prestige and the pressure of owning it. The result was inevitable. The estate stood abandoned. Nature crept in, the ocean wind whistled through cracked windows, and the once grand home faded into memory. What was once the pride of a Hollywood icon became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most legendary names can be outlasted by time, money, and red tape. But beyond the financial and legal barriers, there was something else, something far less tangible, yet far more powerful. The property had become a legend of its own, wrapped in rumors and superstition, and those whispers were enough to scare off even the boldest buyers. As time went on, John Wayne's abandoned estate became more than just a property. It became a story whispered about by locals, fans, and even real estate agents. The longer it sat empty, the more the myths grew. Some claimed the Duke's spirit still lingered in the halls, his heavy footsteps echoing late at night. Others said strange lights could be seen flickering through the windows, even though the house had long been disconnected from the power grid. Of course, none of these stories were ever proven, but in Hollywood, myths often outlive facts. There was something about the estate's silence that made people uneasy. It was not just an empty house, it was a memory frozen in place. Neighbors described it as if the past refused to let go. Every creak of wood or gust of sea air seemed to carry a whisper from another time. For some, it was beautiful. For others, unsettling. Rumors began to spread about what might still be hidden inside. Some believed that a locked study contained Wayne's final writings, personal reflections he never intended to publish. Others claimed that certain rooms were sealed because of family disputes over private artifacts. There were even stories that valuable film memorabilia had gone missing over the years, sparking quiet accusations within the family circle. Whether true or not, the speculation added to the mystique. Public fascination turned the estate into a local legend. Fans who traveled to Newport Beach sometimes tried to catch a glimpse through the gated entrance, only to be met with overgrown hedges and rusted iron. Online forums and fan pages buzzed with theories, from secret vaults to long-lost treasures. Each story added another layer of intrigue, making the estate less like a piece of real estate and more like a myth that no one wanted to disturb. For potential buyers, that mystique was a double-edged sword. Owning John Wayne's home could mean inheriting not just history, but expectations, judgment, and superstition. People imagined paparazzi lurking nearby, or fan groups protesting any renovation. The estate had become sacred ground in the eyes of many, and sacred ground, no matter how valuable, rarely sells. Even the entertainment industry, which once celebrated Wayne as an untouchable icon, began to shift. Cultural attitudes changed, and his image, once universally admired, became the subject of debate. To some, he remained a hero. To others, a relic of an era best left in the past. That tension only deepened the estate's isolation. It was as though the house itself had become a symbol of a bygone America. Strong, proud, and now quietly fading. Yet through all the gossip, the house still stood. Weather-beaten but defiant, it refused to disappear. Some saw that as fitting, the final echo of a man who built his career on standing firm. But beneath the nostalgia and the myths lies one final truth. John Wayne's estate may never have been meant to be owned again. It belongs to legend now, not to the market. Still, the story doesn't end there, because beyond the mystery and neglect lies a deeper question. What happens when a legacy becomes too heavy for anyone to carry? John Wayne's abandoned estate is more than a house. It is a monument to a legacy frozen in time. Once filled with laughter, stories, and Hollywood glamour, it now sits silent, a relic of an era when icons seemed larger than life. The Duke's personal treasures, from handwritten letters to rare memorabilia, remain locked away, untouched, and carefully preserved. For his family, the property is both a tribute and a burden, too valuable to sell, yet too heavy with memory to restore fully. The estate's silence and isolation have given rise to rumors and mystique, making it almost untouchable. Fans visit Newport Beach hoping to glimpse a piece of history, but they leave with a strange mix of admiration and melancholy. The property is no longer just real estate. It is a time capsule, a museum of old Hollywood ideals, and a weight of responsibility few would dare carry. Perhaps that is why no one wants to buy it. It belongs more to legend than the market, a silent reminder that some monuments are meant to remain untouched. Now, I want to hear from you. Should John Wayne's estate remain preserved as it is, or be transformed for the next generation? Like, comment, share, and subscribe to explore more untold stories behind the legends of Hollywood.